Michael Cole on the Logan Paul podcast, as we've already been talking about. But he made a comment that I'd imagine that Vince McMahon 10 years ago would absolutely love. And I don't know, maybe Vince McMahon today absolutely loves it. Maybe not so. I don't know his workings and love of WWE currently, now that he's outside of the company looking in. But one thing Vince McMahon made it kind of clear in the last 20 years or so, and sometimes scary to us fans, is how much he tried pulling away from the word and the world of professional wrestling, right? Turning wrestlers into superstars, changing it from World Wrestling Federation to World Wrestling Entertainment, and really not going back even when he might have had opportunities to do so. He even made a comment that has always stuck with me, and it's so long ago now, but made a comment, I mean, this is probably 15 years ago or so, where he said he could envision a day when WWE existed without a wrestling ring as its focal point. Like I said, I don't know what that would be, and it never happened, and I think we're far away from that happening. But the reason I tie in with what Vince McMahon said is because Michael Cole said, when talking about the Netflix deal and WWE moving over to Netflix, is that Netflix understood that WWE is an entertainment company, and it's been many years since they have been a pro wrestling company. And that seems like something Vince McMahon always wanted to do, right? Vince McMahon always wanted to be bigger than he was. He wanted to get into movies. He always wanted to be a top player, just like any other commissioner of the NBA. That's why he got into the XFL. He wanted to be taken seriously. He didn't want to just be a wrestling company. So I understand that. But I don't like the we're not a pro wrestling company, we're an entertainment company. First, I just want to say, when he said we haven't been for a few years, I'm very curious where the line he draws is there. When were they, and when did they stop in his eyes?
Yeah.
A few years, like the Attitude Era, the Ruthless Aggression Era, like when were they pro wrestling and when were they not? I'm very curious about that. But just in the sense of pro wrestling is entertainment. Like, it's one and the same. And I don't think that Michael Cole says we're an entertainment company, we're not a pro wrestling company. And I think of all the times in the last 15 years or so, that's the worst time to say that, because there are so many examples now that the world of word wrestling is so much more prevalent. Now that they're bringing in wrestlers from different companies, what do you make of that comment of him saying that WWE is an entertainment company, not a pro wrestling company, and they haven't been for a while?
Yeah, I found it interesting as well, and it's funny because as you were talking about it, the things you were saying, I was thinking the same thing as you were laying it out. To me, it's like it's one of the same for me. Like, it's wrestling and entertainment. It's, to me, I always, how I explain it to my non-wrestling fan friends and family is it's a choreographed show that's scripted. And it's also a soap opera for guys, and I say that, and that's how I explained it for many years. But it's not just for guys; it is for the ladies too, because WWE has evolved over the years. Because we went from divas matches like bra and panty matches and pillow fights and mud wrestling, like things that you look back and you're like, man, that's what we did. It's where we are now. It's evolved, and I think and I say it like this: it's a soap opera for guys and girls, because I think the ladies of today are just as good, if not better, than some of the male wrestlers out there. Like, I'll be honest with you, I've watched different programs on WWE whether it's NXT, SmackDown, Raw, premium live events, and the best matches on the card were the females. So it's like, for me, it's evolved over the years, like that evolution. And with to kind of go back to Michael Cole's point, I get why he's saying it the way that he is, because I think to a point Netflix wants to be in the entertainment business. So I feel like he's just kind of catering to that. I think he knows where his bread is buttered. Michael Cole's been in the business a long time. But I also want to add to this as well, because there have been other people, I've seen on social media, talking about, they see the NFL, Netflix is trying to get in more business with the NFL, and it's because, WWE was a bad deal. Like, that to me is a bunch of bull. I think the WWE and Netflix, they're going to make a lot of money together. So I don't think WWE and Netflix has anything to do with NFL and Netflix, because I think the deal that WWE and Netflix made is a good deal for both parties. I think Netflix is just like WWE, they've evolved. They're evolving. And I think that's the other part of it as well. And to the original point, I think it's just more Michael Cole I think he's more so catering to the Netflix executives. I think he's being the company man and doing it saying the right things. So I take it with a grain of salt because again, pro wrestling and entertainment is one of the same.
It is one of the same. I think it's like saying we're not in the movie business, we're in the comedy business or something like that, right? There are not just one of the same, but I would actually even argue that when it comes to pro wrestling at its core, WWE, and I'll go back to this and some of the stuff you were just saying about the past, WWE actually has more elements of pro wrestling today than it might have. If you wanted to argue that it's an entertainment company more than a pro wrestling company, 2005, 2006 would have been a better argument than it is today. I'll get to that in a minute or so, exactly how that works out. But yes, I mean, so I saw some comments online, and these are obviously wrestling fans talking to wrestling fans, and a lot of them were saying, yes, WWE is entertainment, AEW is pro wrestling. They're different. And I will say to wrestling fans, they are, just like anime is different from one show to another show to anime fans. But to non-professional wrestling fans, if I show, and I do all the time, I show them AEW and I show them WWE, and I'm sorry to tell you, world out there, they don't know the difference. They don't know the difference between AEW and WWE or TNA and any of these other things. They know scale. They know this looks more local. This looks bigger. But wrestling is wrestling to them, right? There's not anybody out there who says, I won't, that's never watched wrestling before. That's I'll watch AEW because I like pro wrestling, but I won't watch WWE or vice versa kind of thing. Like there's the wrestling community and the non-wrestling community. That's it, right? Within the wrestling community, there's obviously people who can distinguish differences. And I find it kind of funny because I was reading earlier today that TKO potentially might have bought in Lucha Underground and might be reviving it. And you want to talk about a company that is more entertainment, right? That's another reason why WWE is currently pro wrestling, because Lucha Underground was filmed in like a studio, and it was also filmed with edits and cuts, not live. The shows were shows, not typically like events like they are now with WWE and what you're used to. So if you want to argue maybe that is entertainment and stuff, then you can. But to go back on the point of like him saying that this is entertainment and not professional wrestling, you're right. In 2005, I'm sorry to say, right? But bra and panties matches, they're more bra and panties matches, the set design, the more idea of like the Jericho show and the KO show and the highlight reel, you know what I mean, and the rated R show and the Undertaker's graveyard, the what was it, the funeral parlor back in the day or the barbershop. Like there was way more of those back in the day and like in the early 2000s than there are today. And you were just talking about how women's wrestling has evolved. So if it's actually an entertainment show, you should probably scale back on the women's wrestling and have more bra and panties matches, right? Because the idea is you want to diversify. You don't want it to be wrestling. I'm not saying I want that because I like wrestling, but I'm saying if you're trying to tell me that this is a wrestling or entertainment show versus wrestling show, well, then you got to show me some parts that aren't wrestling, because other than some segments that lead to wrestling, it's wrestling, and it's never been more wrestling. We've never had less of those talk shows. We've never had less women doing other things. Back in the day, women would exist to do literally anything but wrestle, right? You would have them in like a pool fighting. You would have, I remember back in the day, like you had Hulk Hogan and the Giant in that one match where they had each other's monster trucks go at each other on top of a roof, and they had to like run the monster truck off the roof. We don't really have anything like that. Everything is wrestling. I mean, we see the pay-per-views now. There's only like 5 matches on the card. There are no like arm wrestling contests. There are no like pose-offs like we saw with Triple H and Scott Steiner in the early 2000s. You know what I mean? There's none of that like kind of, like
well, to
silliness.
Be fair, we did have Bobby Lashley and Austin Theory do a little pose-off like,
3 years ago. Yeah. There was like way more of that, right? Now there's way less of that. Like,
which is a good thing.
Like back in the day, women literally had bra and panties matches, like, and they sometimes would just even have it where like there was no, you just ran around slapping each other or doing stuff like that. Which, if you again want to say that you're a variety show, you got to have some variety. And
here's the thing too, they were also that, and most, even going back even further than that, mostly just valets, so to speak. They were just the managers.
Well, yeah, I'm talking, just on the idea that, like, I feel like if you watched Raw in the year 2000, there was probably like a half an hour segment where wrestlers would not just talk. Now it's talking or wrestling, but back then they would like do other stuff. Like Total Divas is a good example of like that, right? Where I know we still have some things like shows that exist now, right? But even shows we exist now, like the brand new LFG, very centric on wrestling, right?
Yep.
Total Divas was literally not, right? Total Divas doesn't exist anymore, but it literally was just following around doing anything but wrestling.
Yeah,
Their
it
love
was a
life.
reality show.
Yeah, they just so for him to say we haven't been a wrestling company for a while, I don't necessarily know when they were a wrestling company and what kind of time he's comparing it to, but also just the idea that I understand that WWE is different in a wrestling company versus AEW for sure. I mean, everybody's different. I think a good example of that is, right, I'm not a big NBA fan. Grew up, huge NBA fan. Love the NBA. Thought it was the best basketball. I don't really watch it nowadays because I'm not entertained by it. I don't think it's the best basketball out there. But I'm not going to come over here and say that it's, I might tongue in cheek say, that's not basketball. You know what I mean? What they're doing out there. Yeah. But at the end of the day, it actually is basketball. Whether you like it or not, it's basketball.
It's just different. It's just different than what we grew up with.
Yeah, so it's just like to say we're not a wrestling company is just, I don't know who, maybe you're trying to cater to Netflix, but also I think it's that same idea of like Vince McMahon back in the day talking about like he wanted it to be more than it, and he just hated being pigeonholed and kind of pinpointed out to being like one trick pony. And Michael Cole, I think he wants to work for a company that is larger than life, which the WWE essentially is. But at the end of the day, it is indeed a pro wrestling company. It's around pro wrestling. And one way that they're showing that now more than ever is like the WWE ID program, where they bring in their talent. Yes, of course, they're bringing in talent from football and basketball and places they may have before. But where are they finding like a lot of their other talent, like WWE ID? Pro wrestling. It's kind of funny because the movie, I don't know, like, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. That's a movie. How many of those people in that movie were wrestlers or wrestled in a previous life? Like zero? It's kind of funny that WWE, most of their talent is in wrestling. They're wrestlers from other companies. Yes, they pull and pick people from all walks of life, as Triple H used to like to say, but that walk of life, for the most part, is wrestling. It's AEW talent. It's TNA talent. It's WWE independent, like GCW talent. It's from other wrestling companies, right? Here's how, I guess, the difference between an entertainment company and a pro wrestling company, and this is why I'm glad I watch a pro wrestling company despite what Michael Cole likes to advertise. iShowSpeed did not win the Royal Rumble. He is not the world champion. He did not last very long in the Royal Rumble. And an entertainment company, he would. The Royal Rumble would be full of iShowSpeeds and Jake Pauls and Logan Pauls and Mr. Beast and Brad Pitt and Sabrina Carpenter. That would be an entertainment company because wrestling wouldn't matter. It would be wrestling, but it would be just a bunch of celebrities from all walks of life. But it's not, right? When iShowSpeed gets in there with Braun Breaker, he doesn't win because they still are using entertainment elements, but still making sure that they stay a pro wrestling company at the end of the day.
It's pro wrestling entertainment is what it is.
And that's what it is.
Because your main part, which is why I say it like this, pro wrestling entertainment, your focus is pro wrestling, but you have elements that are entertaining. Like you brought in the iShowSpeed, which I know a lot of the YouTube kids like, kids like that, but he didn't last long. But he made a viral moment, which was entertaining by Braun Breaker breaking him in half, essentially.
And, at the end of the day, I can say, I'll kind of end on this with Michael Cole, right, is that you can say that pro wrestling is trying to win in fans of all of entertainment or something like that, but trying to be much more entertaining than we are or something of that nature. But at the end of the day, right, the definition of pro wrestling is wrestling in an entertaining form, choreographed, scripted, whatever it is, right? It is, it's like Broadway plays. They're entertainment, but they still are Broadway plays. Broadway plays are entertaining to those who find it entertaining. Like you're not above that, it's just trying to if he said, we're more than just pro wrestling, we're a larger entertainment, that's fine. But trying to say we're no longer professional wrestling anymore, thankfully he's wrong. Thankfully, WrestleMania is still going to happen. Thankfully, the WWE is putting 41 in front of WrestleMania to acknowledge everybody that this is a part of a lineage that goes back to Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan and all those days in the past. And also, like, you have championships as well as a Hall of Fame, which is honoring people like The Undertaker and Triple H and The Rock and people from the past of professional wrestling. If you really wanted to say we are not professional wrestling anymore, you really wouldn't want to associate yourself with anybody who was part of that professional wrestling. You'd want to be a whole different company. But the fact that your YouTube channel is full of old videos, like, hey, watch this Coliseum video from 1992. Why don't you put on more music videos? Where's more Kendrick Lamar and Drake and all this other nonsense, right? Why are you putting on old content back when you were pro wrestling? So I think you are pro wrestling. You've always been pro wrestling. You are the best form of it in the sense of storytelling is what I think that's what he's trying to get at. They tell stories. And here's the thing with pro wrestling in any form, storytelling is essential part of that. There's a difference between wrestling and pro wrestling, and storytelling is a main, attribute to that.
And to that point really quick, and that's why WWE has been more successful than AEW, because the storytelling of WWE is much better than AEW right now.
And to put a bow right on this, WWE and Triple H, right, have acknowledged that they're trying to put more focus on the fans and the crowd and have smaller stages and smaller set designs. Well, you know who does that? The UFC does that. The UFC just puts a ring in the middle and then says, this is the product. The rest of it around, that's nothing. The product is in the ring, right? And if WWE truly didn't believe that the product was just in the ring and that it was much larger than that, it was an entertainment entity as a whole, then I want you to bring back some of those old big stages with the fire-breathing dragon for New Year's Revolution or the Elimination Chamber at the entranceway. I want to see, less advertising in the ring. I want to see less crowd and more set design. But we're not doing that because you are saying that we're focusing on the product more, less on the accoutrements. Well, there you go, right? If WWE truly wants to put their money where their mouth is, or Michael Cole says we're a entertainment company versus wrestling, then knock out 10,000 of those seats so you can put up some silly board that's got mazes and ladders and nonsense and fire. You don't, though, right? Because you know that the camera's going to stay on the ring. And if the camera's going to stay on the ring for the most part, then you know that you're a wrestling company.